Ram finally gave the Power Wagon the diesel engine everyone's been begging for, but they had to sacrifice something to do it, and we'll get to that. For the very first time ever, the Ram 2500 Power Wagon is available with the legendary 6.7-liter Cummins High-Output turbo diesel inline-six engine. The off-road icon that could only be had with a gas V8 for its entire existence finally gets diesel power, and the numbers are seriously impressive. This Cummins High-Output engine pumps out 430 horsepower and a monster 1,075 pound-feet of torque. It's paired with a TorqueFlite HD 8-speed automatic transmission, and four-wheel drive comes standard. Ram says the Cummins-powered Power Wagon can tow nearly 20,000 pounds and carry almost 3,000 pounds of payload. Let's put that in perspective. For the 2026 model year, the only engine you could get in a Power Wagon was the 6.4-liter HEMI V8, rated at 405 horsepower and 429 pound-feet of torque. Towing topped out around 10,590 pounds, and payload was limited to roughly 1,690 pounds. That means the new Cummins Power Wagon delivers roughly an 80 to 90% jump in towing and payload capability. That is a massive leap, and it instantly makes the Power Wagon a far more usable truck for people who actually need to work in tow, not just play in the dirt. And Ram is backing up those towing numbers with hardware to match. For the first time, the Power Wagon can be equipped with fifth wheel and gooseneck preparation, while available automatic leveling rear air suspension helps keep the truck level under heavy loads. Now, here's the twist. To make room for the diesel's charge air cooling hardware, Ram had to remove the traditional front-mounted winch. So the Cummins Power Wagon does not come with that factory winch. That old compromise has finally been reduced, but Ram made one major sacrifice to make it happen. The factory winch is gone. If you're a Power Wagon purist who still wants the sound and character of the HEMI, Ram isn't forcing you into diesel. The 6.4-liter V8 remains available, now rated at 410 horsepower and 429 pound-feet of torque. And there's another interesting detail for HEMI buyers. The gas-powered Power Wagon brings back an available beadlock-capable wheel. Starting at $88,470 including destination, production is ramping up now, with the Cummins-powered Power Wagon arriving at dealerships in the second half of 2026. So how does this new diesel Power Wagon actually stack up against the competition? Let's get into it. The obvious rival here is Ford's Super Duty, specifically the high-output turbo diesel 6.7-liter Power-Stroke V8. So if you're judging purely by diesel horsepower and torque, Ford still has the advantage. The Power-Stroke is rated at 500 horsepower and 1,200 pound-feet of torque, which beats the Ram Cummins figures of 430 horsepower and 1,075 pound-feet. That's a real gap, roughly 70 horsepower and 125 pound-feet in Ford's favor. But once you're already dealing with more than 1,000 pound-feet of torque, the difference on paper doesn't automatically translate into a dramatically different experience for every buyer. Both trucks are capable of handling extremely heavy loads, and for the vast majority of owners, the deciding factor won't come down to that gap alone. What Ford doesn't have is the Power Wagon's specific off-road identity. The Super Duty isn't engineered around rock crawling and technical trails in the same way the Power Wagon is. The Power Wagon brings locking front and rear differentials, a disconnecting front sway bar, built-in shocks, and aggressive off-road hardware designed specifically for serious terrain. Of course, there's a catch worth repeating here. If you want a truck that combines nearly 20,000 pounds of diesel towing capability with serious factory off-road hardware, the Power Wagon is offering a combination you don't normally get in this class, but you're doing it without the factory front winch, since Ram removed it to make room for the diesel's cooling hardware. There's also the Chevrolet side of this equation. That leaves Ram in a pretty unusual position. There isn't a direct Silverado HD equivalent to the Power Wagon's factory off-road package. Chevy's heavy-duty lineup simply doesn't offer anything built specifically for technical off-road use the way the Power Wagon is. So did Ram leapfrog the competition? Not on horsepower and torque numbers. No, Ford still wins the diesel output contest, plain and simple. But in terms of what this specific truck is built to do, Ram may have carved out a niche that neither Ford nor Chevy directly targets, a heavy-duty diesel truck built specifically around serious off-road capability. So it's not about who has the biggest numbers. It's about who's building the right truck for a very specific kind of buyer. And right now, Ram might be the only one really fighting for that space. Now let's talk about something a lot of current Power Wagon owners are probably wondering right now. Does this new diesel engine hurt the resale value of your existing gas-powered truck? Here's the honest answer. It's complicated, and probably not as bad as you think. In general, when a manufacturer introduces a substantially more capable powertrain, the older configuration can face some downward pressure in the used market, because buyers suddenly have a stronger alternative to compare against. That's a normal pattern across the industry, not something unique to Ram. But there are a few reasons why existing Power Wagon owners likely don't need to panic. First, the gas-powered 6.4-liter HEMI V8 isn't going away. The core HEMI-powered configuration remains part of the current lineup, which means your 2026 Power Wagon isn't suddenly an obsolete or discontinued configuration. Second, the two trucks also appeal to somewhat different buyers. Someone who specifically wants the HEMI's sound and the factory winch isn't necessarily going to switch to the diesel just because it can tow more. Third, remember the trade-off we talked about earlier. The diesel Power Wagon gives up its factory front winch to make room for the diesel's cooling hardware. That could make the gas truck more attractive to some serious off-road buyers who consider the factory winch essential. That said, it's reasonable to expect some downward pressure on existing gas-powered Power Wagon values, mainly because the diesel option gives buyers a genuinely new reason to consider the newer truck, especially anyone who tows heavy trailers regularly. If towing capacity was ever a limiting factor for someone considering a used Power Wagon, that argument just got a lot weaker. For current owners, the more realistic scenario is a gradual adjustment rather than any kind of dramatic collapse. Power Wagon's distinctive off-road hardware and loyal enthusiast following give used examples a strong reason to remain desirable, and that fundamental demand isn't going anywhere. So if you already own a gas Power Wagon, don't panic. The diesel could put some downward pressure on values over time, but there's no evidence yet of anything dramatic, and your truck still offers something the diesel doesn't. That factory winch and the classic HEMI experience. So what does this new diesel engine mean for the future of the entire Ram heavy-duty lineup? Let's wrap this up. This isn't the only major update coming to the 2027 lineup. Ram is also introducing the 2500 Emergency Response Vehicle, a new pursuit-rated 3/4-ton pickup built for law enforcement, fire, and rescue agencies. It uses the 6.4-liter HEMI V8, dual 400-amp alternators, and a 4:10 axle ratio, giving emergency agencies the electrical capacity and performance needed for specialized equipment. Ram is also rolling out a new payload upgrade package for most 2,500 trucks equipped with a 6.4-liter HEMI V8, raising the maximum gross vehicle weight rating from 10,000 pounds up to 11,040 pounds, for a best-in-class payload figure of 4,580 pounds in that configuration. And on technology, Ram continues emphasizing what it describes as the segment's most screen coverage, including a 14.5-inch Uconnect 5 touchscreen and a 10.25-inch passenger screen that Ram says is a first for the class. So stepping back, what does all of this tell us about where Ram Heavy Duty is headed? Ram isn't just adding a single new engine option and calling it a day. They're expanding the lineup in multiple directions at once, a genuine off-road diesel flagship in the Power Wagon, a specialized fleet vehicle in the ERV, and increased payload capability across the gas lineup. That's a meaningful shift. Ram appears to be giving the Power Wagon a more distinct identity within the heavy-duty lineup, rather than treating it as just another trim level. It's the only Ram heavy-duty model that pairs true off-road hardware with a high-output diesel option. For the broader truck market, this raises an obvious question. If Ram is willing to build a dedicated diesel off-road flagship, does that push Ford or Chevy to respond with something similar? Right now, neither Ford nor Chevrolet currently offers a direct equivalent to the Power Wagon's factory off-road package, and that gap could shrink or widen significantly over the next couple of years, depending on how buyers respond to the Cummins Power Wagon in the real world. So that's the full picture on the 2027 Ram 2500's new engine, a genuinely significant upgrade with one real trade-off, a competitive gap against Ford's numbers, and some reasonable resale considerations for current owners. All of it suggests Ram is taking a broader approach to the heavy-duty lineup, not just chasing a single spec sheet win. Thanks for watching Cars Review. Let us know in the comments which truck you'd actually choose, and we'll see you in the next one.